Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to lower the tone in English. I'm going to take a very good discussion and make it much simpler because I'm going to have to speak to you in English. I don't have enough German. I have about 10 words of German, and that will not do for this afternoon's discussion. I have had a lot of help in trying to take an English presentation and make it into German. If it's confusing, I also happen to have the people who did the translation here, so we can try to sort it out. But I shall try to go through this fairly quickly. I was tempted to ask Diana and Frank if I could have 2 hours. Because I wanted to respond to a bunch of the things, many of the things which have been said so far today, because all of the speakers have made really interesting points, and I want to have a dialogue. So, if everybody's happy, shall I just talk for the next 2 hours? Is that good? No, maybe not. Okay. In that case, I'll try to do this very quickly and simply. And I am very happy to take questions, and I'm happy to stand and talk about archaeology forever. So if I have to go too fast, talk to me later. So I'm going to spend some time giving you definitions because we have had to develop a lot of background to this. CIfA is now 32 years old. So we've had a long time to develop who we think we are and what we think we do. And I've tried to give this to you on this slide in its simplest way. And I wanted to say at the very beginning, and I will repeat again, that CIfA, we call it CIfA, the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists, but we abbreviate it as CIfA. And CIfA is and always has been an international institute. Most of our members, more information in a moment, most of our members are British, but by no means all. Our outlook is international. Much of our documentation is very UK-centered because we have so many more UK members. But the philosophy is not focused on the UK. So we're not a British company. We're not trying to invade Germany. My presence here is not an invasion. I'm much too, actually I just stand and talk. I don't invade. Okay, so we're not, that's not why I'm here. That's not our presence. And CIfA is not trying to be a big brother. If anything, I think we would like to say that my presence here today is to act as an angel investor. I don't know if that translates. That's a really good phrase in English, but I'm not sure it works. More about that later than if it doesn't work. So, CIfA is a professional institute for archaeologists. Any kind of archaeologist, anywhere in the world, doing any kind of archaeology, whether they have a degree, whether they have 3 degrees, whether they have no degrees. If they're an archaeologist, if they think they are an archaeologist, they can be a member of CIfA. Well, it gets more complicated, so we'll have to work through that. But as a professional institute, in our terms, the way it has had to develop, we have identified these principal characteristics of a professional association, things that not only do we think they set us apart from other organizations, but in legal terms, in the UK, and also with certain parts of the European Union, these characteristics apply. So we have a code of conduct, an explicit written code of conduct. It's about 6 pages long, and it's quite robust. I mean, it's been very carefully written, and it has been tested in court of law. So it is a strong legal document. We also have, in support of that, standards and guidelines. Standards are short statements about what a type of archaeological work should achieve. Guidelines are guidelines. How best to go about achieving that desired end. These are written down. They have been created by archaeologists, for archaeologists, written and consulted across all archaeologists within CIfA, but in the UK also, all archaeologists, whether they're members of CIfA or not. 2, we have conditions for entry. So I said anyone can join. That's true. how someone joins or the grade of membership that they may achieve will depend not on whether they have a degree or whether they have excavated 5,000 Neolithic pits. It will depend upon their demonstrated competence. So they first, in sequence, they first demonstrate competence by submitting a portfolio. Secondly, they have to sign the code of conduct. And I do mean that. You are actually supposed to physically sign the code. Lots of us do it digitally now, but legally it is still the same. And every member has to agree and do continuing education. You can tell by my beard, I did my archaeology degree a long time ago. In fact, I did all my archaeology degrees a long time ago. But I have to do 5 days of education. Effectively, I do 5 days of education every single year in order to maintain my membership in the Institute. How would you feel about going in for open heart surgery, and your surgeon happens to have more gray hair than I do, and he says, "It's okay, I studied surgery 35 years ago, I know what to do." I personally would like to have a surgeon who was more up to date about doing surgery in 2017, not 1980. That's a parallel. Number 3, we have not just the professional code, but we've had to develop a disciplinary process. Every organization we've heard from, every organization that has anything to do with archaeology probably has a code of conduct. That really becomes important when they say, "Mr. Smith, you did bad archaeology, we're going to kick you out of the organization." And Mr. Smith says, "Actually, I dispute that, and I'm going to take you to a court of law." And that happens. Well, it may not have happened in Germany yet, but I bet it will. It has certainly happened in the United Kingdom. That is why I emphasize that we have conditions of entry, and secondly, we have a code and a disciplinary process, so that when it happens, we have something to fall back on. We work very hard to promote the discipline of archaeology in all of its forms, all of its places, and the last point is one that I hope we've got this translated appropriately, because we think that what the Institute does is to work for the benefit of society. All of the people outside this room who happen to think that having historic buildings conserved in the center of Mainz, or linear band ceramic sites preserved in a field in Munich, outside Munich, not in Munich, outside Munich, is of value. We work for them. The Institute also works for me as an individual and for my company, but primarily it works between commercial archaeologists, university archaeologists, state archaeologists, and the general public. I'll explain all of this in a little bit more detail as we go through. So, that was the overview. Let's kind of back up. Let's go through this a little bit more slowly in a little bit more detail. Accreditation. We speak of accreditation for someone who has joined the Institute and demonstrated their competence. So accreditation recognizes the professionalism of the practitioners, it improves their careers, and it attracts new people into archaeology. And our experience is that helping people and other people and organizations, commercial clients, architects, engineers, state government officials, planners, anybody, helping those people understand that we too are professionals and are equal to them means that they treat us more equally. And we can then charge an appropriate amount of money for the work we do, which enables us to pay our staff, me, appropriately, so I get an appropriate reward. I have that contingency left over in case on the Thursday of the last week of the excavation we find a whole bunch of latin burials. I have a dispute with a few members of the audience here, but I happen to think that latin archaeology is the most important. I know there are some people who disagree. You understand? Yeah, that's right. You get my point. It doesn't matter whether it's late Iron Age archaeology or whatever. It's having a research design which is appropriately resourced, time and money. You don't have those, all the best will in the world, and you do not end up doing good archaeology. I want to try to explain a difference as quickly as I can, but it is important because it touches upon the relationship between how I see CIfA, and I want you to understand CIfA, and some of the other organizations. We are not a trade union. We do not, in the UK, set salaries for archaeologists. Oh, I wish we could. And in fact, we used to do. But by law, we're not allowed to because we are not a trade union. And there is a legal distinction in the land where I now work. But the evidence in the UK is very clear that having a professional association has, over the last 20 years, steadily improved the pay and working conditions of archaeologists all the way across, not just the UK, but everywhere we work. Archaeological salaries are better now than they were when I first came to doing archaeology in Britain in 1980-something. I've had a pension for 10 years. Well, no, sorry, I'm not getting the pension yet. I haven't retired. But I am contributing, and my employer is contributing to a pension, and has been for years and years. Gosh, it's almost like having a real job. It's like being a grown-up person all of a sudden. That is the kind of difference that over time being professional achieves. We achieve it in the UK a little bit indirectly because we are not a trade union. We work very closely with two trade unions in the UK who between them represent most of the archaeologists who have chosen to be members of a trade union. Does that make sense? Okay. Second point I wanted to make very quickly here is that not only have we seen pay and conditions for individual archaeologists improve, but very importantly, and I think this is important because if I understood something that one of the earlier speakers said, this is really fundamental, that over that same time period, we have seen the quality of the archaeology product, archaeological knowledge, archaeological archives, archaeological publications. We have seen the quality of that product go up, improving steadily. I love being able to throw two things at you because I simply watched it happen. I had nothing to do with it. So I'm boasting, but it's not my work. In 2006, one of the most prominent university professors did a study of the output of what was called then grey literature. So it's all the archaeology stuff that we produce, as well as the formal publications that come out. And that study looked at about 10 years' worth, thousands and thousands of archaeological investigations all the way across the UK. And the outcome, I love this, the outcome was without doubt that the quality of the work, the knowledge being produced by commercial archaeology was far greater than that of any other source of archaeology. Better than that being done by the state, or in your words, the federal government, better than that being done by the counties in my language, or the states, the land in yours, and better than that being done by universities. And there is a reason for that, because we learned, the commercial archaeologists learned to do good work quickly and focusing on particular research questions. And that was then repeated about 2 years ago by another one of the prominent archaeologists, this time working in the Roman world, in the Roman period, but primarily in Northwestern Europe. And the outcome was the same, that our knowledge of Roman settlement patterns is now far greater than it would ever have been without that grey literature. So, commercial archaeology has improved for individuals and the quality of the work we do. Good archaeology. I know it's shorthand, but that's the phrase I will use and want to use, because for me, doing good archaeology is the most important thing there is. Right. I'm going to throw a lot more information at you. This is just some more information about CIfA. We have 3,267 members. Well, that's where it was a few weeks ago. The number goes up and down because some of them are older than I am and they've gone to the great site office in the heavens, and we have other students coming in. So the numbers vary, but it's about 3,200, 3,300 members, of whom 2,400 plus minus are professionally accredited, and the other 852 are more junior grades, for principally aimed at students and at, we call them affiliates. And again, some of these words don't always translate as well as one would like. So those are people who are interested in archaeology, want to remain involved, but probably don't earn their living doing archaeology. Probably go on excavations in the summer because they enjoy doing it, read lots of archaeology books. They just want to support the work we do. We have 80 registered organizations. I'll come back to this. But a registered organization is a corporate parallel to an individual. We have 3,267 individual members. We have 80 corporate members. The reasoning for this, about 12, 13 years ago, was that within the UK and a lot of the other places where our members work, most of the work that was being done by a commercial company, not by an individual. I may direct an excavation, but it's my company that signs the contract. And if there is a contract between a client and my company, and I'm the one doing it and I don't follow the code, everything begins to get a little bit confused. We needed clarity. We needed a degree of legal clarity so that we created registered organizations where the organization itself signs the code of conduct and agrees to work to the same standards as every other individual member would have to do. We have members in 31 countries. We have only about 120 who live and work most of the time outside of the UK. So we are very UK-centric. But of the 3,000 members, some 600 of them routinely, for the majority of their time, work outside of the UK. And they are responsible to do all of their work according to the code of conduct and the standards and guidance anywhere, everywhere they work. So I'm here representing CIfA. I'm also the director and owner of a small archaeological company, commercial company. I do most of my field work in West Africa, and all the work I do has to satisfy the same CIfA code as the work that I do in Oxford or London or Exeter or any other city in the UK. So we would say that CIfA works without national boundaries. And I had a small laugh with a couple of people over here. We were talking about fear. Some of us are very fearful about things going on with UK governments. It causes one concern. But that doesn't matter to CIfA. CIfA is not part of the UK government. We do not, Brexit doesn't matter to CIfA. Discuss. Okay. How do we do our work? Oh, I'm going to go way over time. This is terrible. I should have had 2 hours. I asked. We have 18, I'm going to have to go quickly. We have 18 special groups, special interest groups. We have an annual income and turnover of 700,000 euro, probably a bit more this year. We have 13 individuals that we employ. That's the same as 10 people full-time on CIfA staff. We routinely rely upon over 100 of our members to give their time. I volunteer my time today and tomorrow. So that's about the same number of people as are in this room. We respond to 60 consultation events every year from the national government. In one way or another, they come to ask us questions about the formulation of law or government policy. And that last one, that's really important too. We routinely do about 20, 25 disciplinary investigations a year. That's where I stand up and say, Mr. Smith, he excavated a site and he didn't bother to excavate all the pits because he thought he knew they were Iron Age pits, and he's a Romanist, okay? Doesn't work. So about twice a month we have to investigate examples like that. So again, more information for you. I like this one. This shows the steady growth of CIfA. We like showing things like that, but it is important. So we started off, 30 odd years ago. We now have 3,200 members. It took 30 years to grow to that size. But numbers are important. Not all numbers, not all equally important, but numbers are important because 3,000 people of a professional association is enough to make a politician listen, frankly, at state level, national level, federal level. They begin to think, ooh, this is a constituency that I and my party should listen to. We need to be careful. So they start to ask questions. That's important. We don't have to wait until they make a stupid law to say, that's a stupid law. We have the chance beforehand to say, if you do that, that might be really problematic. We think you should do it this way. And sometimes it works. Well, quite a lot of times it works. Not always the way we want, but... Okay, so that leads us into policy and advocacy. I'm going to skip through part of this quite quickly because it's some of these same things have been mentioned by the speakers before me. Because we all try to do the same things, but some things are better done by what I would call a membership organization, which is like DGUF, or a professional association like CIfA, or an organization of the heads of the state archaeological services, because they have a different voice and they have a different a priori reason for speaking in a debate. Does that make sense? So a professional association has a way of saying things that other groups may not. And CIfA has developed its own voice. We make our voice louder by creating memorandums of understanding. Forgot to translate that. Ray?
Good question.
We do a memorandum of understanding with other organizations who have similar interests, where we agree to work closely together, not stepping on each other's, trampling on each other's toes, but saying, this is going to be a problem, we think this, what do you think? Working up a joint statement on how a state government should respond. So we think that's very important, and one of my jobs here today is simply to say, I'm not trying to compete with everybody else in this room. I'm trying to understand who the people in this room are so we can work more closely together. At least until Brexit happens, things that are EU have an effect in Britain. Things that are done by the EU will always have an effect in Britain. So it helps all of us to have a voice, not just at Oxford City, not just in Mainz, not just in Westphalia, not in Bavaria, but Germany, and even better, across the EU. That is what advocacy and policy really tries to lead to. Okay, managing quality. I've talked a lot about doing good archaeology. I am so over time. Okay, we have a code of conduct which every member has to follow. We set standards for person, for process, and product. That's the way we phrase it. And these are all written out. This gets complicated. Wait a minute, it gets a lot more complicated. We set standards and then we measure how people and organizations comply with those standards. And we work always with the individuals and the organizations to make the standards better. I have to do education every year. We expect the organizations to get better every year as well. Doing good archaeology in 1980 isn't the same as doing good archaeology now. Every organization needs to be able to improve. And that holds true everywhere we work. Otherwise, we fall behind. So, we measure compliance. We have a very carefully explicit process for judging compliance with person, process, and product. Now, 13. I'm skipping ahead. I'm going to try to cut this through. We have 13 standards which cover a variety of ways and types of doing archaeology. I'm going to skip on. Let's go on. Standards, I hope we understand. I'll tell you more about it later. Let me talk about this one, which I think is a little bit more difficult and more interesting, because this is who can join. and the how we go about doing it. The quality of the person. This is about demonstrating competence. So we have non-accredited grades, students and affiliates. Those are people who probably either want to become archaeologists or maybe retired or just want to do archaeology at the weekend, on their holiday. But we have 3 accredited grades of professional archaeologists: practitioners, associates, and members. And again, these we went back and forth trying to translate, and it doesn't work, so we just left the English labels in. We assess the technical competence of every applicant, personal and corporate, against these kinds of standards. So anyone can join. Their grade of membership will depend on how they demonstrate their competence. We also require everyone to sign the code, and if they are accused of doing something wrong, doing bad archaeology, we then investigate. So ethical competence is judged after the fact. We know that's a weakness, but we'll come back to that if I don't have time. I'll tell you about that later. This is where it gets really complicated. This is, several people here have nearly had a nervous breakdown looking at this matrix. This is called a Dreyfus Matrix. And it's not just, we didn't make this up. This is used by a lot of professional associations as a way of measuring competence of individuals in various ways. We call it knowledge, autonomy, coping with complexity, and perception of context. Someone said it very well earlier. It's not knowing how to dig a site, it's not knowing how to analyze Roman pottery, it's understanding what does that mean outside this room. That's what context is all about, and complexity. And we're aware that the simple way of translating these things is going to make you even more confused than you probably are now. But that's a process that's already in hand. We ask all of our applicants to submit a portfolio of evidence. That doesn't translate well either, because evidence means something different if simply translated to you than it would do to me. It's a record of your experience. We want to know what you've learned to do and how well you've learned to do it. Not how well you can hold a trowel, but how well you can do whatever kind of archaeology it is you do. And we ask you to explain it to us, because we have members who are ceramic specialists and archaeogeophysicists, archaeobotanists, and they don't all hold trowels. So it's not a simple matter for us to define what it is that we require. Registered organizations, again, very quickly. We've got 80 of them. They commit to abiding by the Code of Conduct and by all the standards. They are registered for only 3 years, and they have to reapply. When they apply, they have to submit a portfolio. We want to see the work they've done. Is it good archaeology? It's not just did they tick the boxes, did they do a good job? Is there new knowledge coming out of the work they've done? Did they follow all the procedures, quality assurance, H&R, personnel, employment matters, contracts for staff, pensions for staff, sick leave, travel payments, travel accommodation? All those things are inspected by a committee from CIfA. We inspect their excavations, if they do excavations, and we take up references from their peers, their colleagues. So if Ray is going to set up a new company, he's going to apply to be an RO, we will come and ask the state archaeologists for the 3 states where he works, does Ray do a good job? Tell us about how he does field work. Tell us how he reports. Tell us how he coordinates what he does with you. And that is part of the process of registering the organization, because those are measures of quality. And all of the individuals, all those organizations, are accountable under that complaints process everywhere they work. And does it work? Oh yeah, I'll tell you, it does work. Have we kicked people out of the Institute? Yes. We've kicked individuals out of the Institute. Have we done the same thing to organizations? Yes. One organization did it twice. And the good news is they've rejoined again because they've improved. The point isn't that they did something wrong and got booted out. It's that they learned the value of trying to do it right and came back. And then they did something else wrong and got kicked out again. And they've learned again, and they've come back and rejoined. And I think that's really important. It's kind of sad. It took them 3 times, but it does work. And that's important. If you kick a member of the Institute out, you kick an organization out, it is an act that affects people's lives. It becomes a legal process. You have to have, any organization has to have a really robust, a strong way of doing that. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes discredited. Frank, do you want me to stop? That's a good place to stop. Okay, let's just see it. One last point. I wanted to make the point that the disciplinary process is important, and we use it. We use it a lot because that's the way of policing whether or not our members do good archaeology, whether our members are good employers. We've kicked an organization out because they did not use proper contracts with their staff. That is the way that we find making good archaeology sustainable. I'll stop.